Well, good evening. My name is Jim Kello. Welcome to New Tracks Meetup. Thanks so very much for coming this evening. We hope you enjoy our show. I hope you'll tell your friends about it and try to convince them that they ought to join us. If you are new to the show, I hope that you'll go to our website and register or subscribe, I guess I should say. Our website is newtracksmodeling.com. And please don't forget to confirm your registration by the email that comes automatically as soon as you've subscribed at the website. If you have some friends that you think might be interested in our show, when you get the email with the Zoom login link, please feel free to share it with your friends. Because if you think that they would be interested, that's the only way that they're going to be able to find out about our shows, is if you pass the word along. As I've said before, it takes a lot of people to produce these shows and get them on the air. And we really need a lot of help to do that. We have a lot of jobs. Some of them are very small. Some of them are very large. We're not asking for an inordinate amount of time. But if you have a little bit of time that you could share with us to help us produce the show, we sure would appreciate it, because everybody here is really giving an awful lot to produce these shows twice a week, and a little help would certainly be appreciated. We have a new segment that I'm starting. It's called I've Got a Question. The new segment is really geared to the modeler who just would like to ask a question, and have the people that are on the show, some of which are just fantastic modelers that can cover a wide range of subjects, either answer it then, or we'll try to find somebody at the next show that can come and answer the question. So there's two ways that you can participate. We have a form on our website that you can fill out. That form will come to me directly. And the other is when I open the show for that segment, you can just ask your question then, and that's fine too. I have one person that has sent me an email who has a question, and his name is George Masak, Masak, and George said that as Christmas present, he got a new spray gun, and he would like to have somebody come and do a presentation on the subject, because while he thinks it's a great Christmas present, he really needs some help trying to figure out how to use it. So if any of you out there think that you might be interested in coming and doing a short presentation on the operation and how to get the best use out of the spray equipment, please let me know, and we'll schedule it so George can get an answer to his question. Now I'd like to turn to Ted Becker, who is filling in for Paul Thompson this evening with his quick tip of the evening. So Ted, thank you so much for doing this.
Okay. Quick tip for today. Let me get the screen sharing up here. You're going to get needled today. This is a pack of sewing needles. You can get these on Amazon for just a couple of bucks. And they have all kinds of uses. These are some of mine. I've had these for years. This is, I got this like 40 years ago. It's solid brass, cheap pin vise. It's only got 2 leaves to the jaw, so it was useless for holding a drill for drilling. So, but it's fine for holding a needle. The brass one on the left is one I got more recently at one of those, those tool guys that show up at the at the conventions and the larger spot meets. It also is kind of useless as a pin vise for drilling because it's not concentric, but it holds a needle. And then there's always the ploy of making a little hole in a piece of wood and some epoxy or super glue to hold it in. And one of the things they tell you to use these things for is a needle to put a drop of CA glue or a drop of oil right in a specific spot. Problem is, my drop always comes out like this. It's halfway up from the point of the needle and doesn't put it right exactly where I want. A much better applicator is this little fork, which you can buy them from Micromark for about, I don't know, $6 to $8. But there's also a way to make your own. You need to be careful because this is a hardened, brittle steel. And when you go to bend it and break it, it could shatter and little pieces fly. So be careful. You take a pair of pliers and you hold the eye of the needle in the pliers like this. And then you use a rag or a paper towel to hold the needle just to protect your hand. And then when you snap it, give it a very sharp, quick snap. You'll get a much cleaner break if you do it fast. For some reason, just putting the pressure on slowly and let it snap, it doesn't break as cleanly as it does when you're quick. So snap it quick. And then if you need to touch it up with some fine emery paper or a sharpening stone, but mine usually come out usable just as is. When you pick your pliers, look for something like you have on the right here that have a very sharp corners to them that close up nice and tight. On the left here, these aren't pliers. It's just a machinist clamp that just to illustrate what you do not want. You do not want these rounded edges. You want them nice and sharp, and then you'll get a nice clean break to make your own glue applicator forks. And that is the end of my tip for today.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for sharing it with us.
Can I add a comment to this?
Sure.
After you've used that needle with CA and you don't wipe it off for some reason, you'll find that the CA plugs up the end and it gets hard in there, and then it's not near as effective. If you hold that end of that needle over a candle flame, the flame will burn the CA off of the needle, and then you're right back in business again. It's a good way to clean it off, because you can try to do it with an X-Acto knife, scraping at it or something. I found that doesn't work all that well, but if you just put it under a flame, it'll burn it right off.
I never thought about that. That's a great.
I read it somewhere. I confess to not being the originator of the idea, but it does work, and I use it on mine.
Fantastic. Now, you know, we have the special segments on the show. We have people come on like Martin Breckbilt, MMR, and Clark Cooney, MMR, and we have all of these different people that have been on the show. And the other day, somebody said, "Well, you know, we need to have a way for everybody to be able to remember and go back and see all the special segments so that they can find out a technique that they might have missed and so on." And that's a great idea. We just don't have the personnel to do it. So as an alternative, during that discussion, we decided to recommend that everybody do what a lot of modelers are already doing. And that's keep a notebook by your work that you're doing on your workbench. And if you hear something on one of the shows, write it down in your notebook. And the next time you're building something, and maybe that'll refresh your memory enough where then if you want to go back, you can see the specific show because you'll have the date of the show there, who said it, so forth, right there in your notes. And it'll simplify things tremendously for you. And at the same time, accomplish maybe better what we're trying to accomplish, and that's give information to modelers about building techniques and how to solve problems in their modeling. So that's right now our solution, because we just can't, we don't have the personnel to do the other thing and get it on our website. So now I'd like to go, well, before I do that, Rick and Maureen Hunter are going to start their build along on the 22nd of May, the next show. And this is really going to be special. They're going to be on for 2 months, every Saturday. And they're going to be there for 30 minutes. And in fact, showing you in great detail how to build and weather this 30-foot King Truss bridge. And I hope that you'll come for it. I hope that if you haven't investigated the offer that Al Collins has made for his Ultimation equipment, he's given a 10% discount if you're doing the build along with Rick and Maureen, that you'll take a hard look at it, because this is really going to be a special segment for the show. This is the longest one that we've done. This is the most detailed one that we have done. So I hope that you'll enjoy it, and it will start May the 22nd show, and hope that you'll be available and join us for that, as well as each one of them for the next 2 months. So now I'd like to go to Martin Breckfield, MMR, for his scratch building a car. Martin, welcome.
Thank you, Jim. Let's get my screen up here. And close that. Hey, there it is. At least I have it on my screen. Everybody else got it?
Got it.
Okay, we're good. So I'm actually keeping track of this. So, eventually I'll get the double digits. I don't know. So last week I was at 4 down, 4 to go, and I still have 4 to go. And on the frames that I built last year that I use generally for building cars, but I'm not going to use one of those. So we're going to start with a whole new frame, completely different tactic. Well, not completely different, but I'm going to leave the center long here because we're going to add steps at the end, at each end. This is scribe siding, scribe side down. So when you flip the car over, for people who like to see all that excruciating level of detail on the underside of the car, you'll see scribed wood as opposed to just a blank sheet of wood. And this will get cut off on the end here, as you'll see in a few slides later. So we'll build the ends. Well, we have ends, just scribe siding with Grant Line door. That's actually painted black behind the door. It's not, this is a solid piece of 1x stock and pine. Cut the width of this roof section and that floor section that I just showed you. They match, well, pretty closely at least. A couple of car bolsters. Everything should be that same width. So things are actually defined pretty much by the width of the car, by the width of the bolsters that I use. So we'll just glue that up. We have a roof, a milled roof section, some 1x stock with our ends glued onto the ends. You see, this is all made up of scrap pieces of scribe siding. Not going to waste too much time cutting my 6-inch wide scribe siding to build a car when I have a Ziploc bag full of siding scraps. Don't throw anything away. Throw it in a Ziploc bag, sort it out by the width and thickness. You'll have it later. You can use it for all kinds of things. I do that with wire as well, so I don't waste anything. I don't have to pull out a 12-inch piece of wire to snip off a 1/2-inch piece. It's in a Ziploc bag of scraps from three projects back. You see, this is also lettered A, so I know which side is which. They may be slightly different. Everything's, never quite 100% perfect. There's what the ends look like after it's glued up. That scribe siding cleaned off the ends. And here's something for a platform to be built on. And I've actually even extended my airline here with a union joint that I soldered into place because it was too short. Well, we just add an extra inch or two, solder it on, not worry about it. We'll come back to it later. But you see, this extends longer than the car. One thing I don't like about milled roof sections is end grain. You cut it off, it's that ugly end grain. It sucks up, sucks up paint like a sponge. You can't glue anything to it very easily. So I generally cover that over with a piece of, this looks like 2x or 3x stock that I glued to the ends. And you can glue to end grain. There's a layer of goo on top of the end grain. There's a dribble of CA on the piece of wood here, this flat stock. Stick them together, get it flush at the bottom. So now I have a nice overhang over the scribe siding on the end. Just trim this to the shape of the milled roof, sanding block, trim out the ends with the scalpel. That nasty end grain's gone, and now you have a nice little 1 inch, 2 inch overhang over your scribe siding end of the car. Problem solved. Let's start to lay out the sides. Couple of windows. You can see this is also some extra pieces. There's 3 different pieces of scribe siding here. Just glue it up. I don't worry about it. It's end glued, edge glued on top of this glass work surface. You just lay out some windows, open up a door opening here, piece of 1/32 flat stock behind it to close it off, some 1x stock going around the framing, and some real small quarter round trim to round the edges. You can still get quarter round trim from Northeastern scale lumber last I looked, but I'd run and get it while you still can, because who knows how long they'll keep making that stuff. So there's our 2 sides. You got some Grant line windows. The quarter round's all in place. It's all mitered into the corners. That's fun to do with, but I recommend a scalpel and a sanding block and a lot of patience. You don't want to take too much off too quickly. You want just enough so it slips right into place, drops in there, a little bit of pressure. Take it back out, a little bit of glue. It's not going to go anywhere when you get it in and it's snug. I go back to the ends here. Well, magically, now the ends off the roof are the same length as the end platform.
Ed,
I'm something of a thaumaturgical skilled person, so I've actually made this work.
Ed,
Yes, Jim.
What in the world's going
Jim?
on?
I think Jim has lost his audio.
Okay, well, am I still on?
Yes, you are still on.
Well, maybe, yeah, there he goes. He looks like
Ah,
he's
there he goes, connecting us. All right.
So how did this
Sorry for the interruption.
That's okay. So how did I affect this magical extension of the solid wood roof? And you can see there it is. And you can even see there's individual boards underneath here and a new end board. But I didn't just glue all these on here and hope that they all stayed in place in the right shape. That's just not going to work. The trick here, you can just barely see it right along the edge. There's a piece of 4x6 card trimmed to the shape, roughly the shape of the roof, glued into place and cut to the alignment with this end here, a little longer actually. And that little bit of cardstock, like a 3x5 card, it's a 4x6 card. I like the larger ones. Now you can go back after that's glued into place and add all these boards to make it look like the roof is made out of individual boards. And then you can add this end piece, just copy the other end here and extend it out. This is also a good time to splash some paint on it to see what it looks like. Add a piece of trim across the top around the door framing. Add your grab irons here now, because putting them in later gets really hairy and you don't want to be messing with that later. Get stuff in while it's accessible before you work yourself into a corner that you can't get back out of. Well, the ends and now the sides. Well, we've added a bunch of 1x stock to frame out the doors, make them look a little better than just a plain piece of 1/32 flat stock, and splash a coat of paint on it just to see what it looks like. Because putting a coat of paint on it will tell you where your errors are very quickly. It's like a camera. They conspire, camera and paint working together conspire to show you every error that you could possibly make. So you know, frequently will tell me to go back and fix something that I forgot about. Well, we just drop the sides into place.
Now your audio's gone, Martin.
Oh, now I'm gone.
Well, I can hear
I
it.
can hear him.
Now you're
I can-
back.
Okay.
Okay, apparently Zoom is having issues tonight.
Okay. Well,
Just plug along.
okay. So just glue the end on, the sides on here. This is some steel. I'm not sure where I got it from, but I made my own stirrup steps out of steel here. This is steel wire. It's 28,000 steel wire. I had a bundle of that laying around, and I was running out of brass at the time, and brass wire was getting hard to find. So, well, wire is wire. It bends. It's the right dimension. Bend it and use it. It'll paint up, and who knows what it is under the paint. And I started putting in some queen. I got the needle beams in. I started putting in some queen posts. There's a couple of brass ones there. And we'll go back to the underbody. Okay, lots of things going on here now. We've got a Grant Line K-brake system. Some looks like some of my resin cast brake levers. Some hangers from Precision Scale. The usual character of parts and pieces. The Grant Line turnbuckles cut and used for clevises on wire. The regular surgical silk turnbuckles, and a mixture of brass and plastic queen posts and the steel stirrups. Over here we've got the brake stirrup. This is actually a piece of brass box stock that has a hole drilled through it and cut off and shaped with a Dremel and just glued into place. And you can see the base of the end railings. I drilled these all the way through. Got an end beam on now. I had to add a mounting block for the KD coupler, but I make the end beams. Let's see what's on the next stage. Okay, I make these in place upside down from the other side. So the holes are drilled. I'm inserting the wire from the other side, flip the car over, and I solder it together upside down, then take it out, flip it over, and put it into place. Because I use the holes in the car where it's going to go for alignment. That way I get it aligned right the first time without it wandering around. We've got Caboose Steps. These are keel line, which is now Scale City Designs. Piece of channel underneath of here. The other two nut bolt NBW castings for the truss rods are actually behind this step. There's a little bit of a gap here. They're hiding behind there. That's what's holding the truss rods together. I have no idea whose brass ladder that was. It's a decent looking one, but I added a mounting plate at the bottom with a piece of angle stock that I trimmed the plate to fit that distance. These are actually bent over, hammered out brass, and it's wrapped around in place and then soldered again. So that holds that all together. And I've started on the roof. We've got the letter boards up here. And a little bit, let's see what's on the next page. Well, it's just another view of the same thing from the other direction, but you can see the airline comes through that channel. Well, there's the roof. The roof is actually single ply, 50% overlap of napkin material that I get from Panera. I happen to like Panera napkins. I like the texture on them and the pattern in it, because, as opposed to other napkins. And so it's layered from one end to the other. You can barely see the marks, and that's got a coat of lark light gray on it from Flowquill. I like the light gray and dark gray lark from Flowquill. I don't know what I'm going to do when I run out. But put that on after I get the supports for the walkway in, and all these end walks are in place first. that's a white metal smoke jack from Traincraft, I believe. So it's probably 75 years old. But I take these, put them through the drill press, and clear out the smokestack so the smoke can actually come out if we're actually going to work. I added the air hoses on the end, just an air hose glued to a piece of 3/64 brass tubing as a union joint that then just slips over the 33 thousandths wire that's coming out of the end. All done and holds it together. Okay, so we got our brake wheels on here, some paint on the detail parts. Hey, I put the trucks on even, and they actually match for once. Everything's painted. Paint the windows before you put them in place. It makes things a lot easier. These actually have a little bit of aluminum paint. Actually, it's platinum mist on top of the shield. But yeah, you paint these in advance. And I actually like to paint these on a separate piece of glass. So it makes for a clean paint job. It doesn't stick to anything, and I can get the small pieces off the glass, and then I can glaze them after they're painted, drop them into the hole. Just a little bit of goo or CA holds them in place. Doesn't take a lot of pressure, and they stay right where you put them. Look at it from the other end. These are just individual boards. It's just probably 3x12s in HO. For some reason, I've gotten stuck on using a lot of HO 3x12s and 3x10s, but it works out fine. There's your underbody. That's dark walnut stain from Minwax. After I've painted everything, little bits and pieces with steam black, I come back and just splash the entire thing with Minwax dark walnut. And that's it. We're done with that car. And that's where you find me. And if you got any questions, now's the time to start asking them. And I'm going to stop sharing and get out of my slides too.
Does anybody have any questions for Martin?
Boy, you all know it all. So you can just build these.
Well, I got a question.
Go ahead.
You kind of ran through it rather quickly.
Oh.
For me.
I'm sorry, sir. Can you please fill out the form?
You talked about making a brass railing.
Yeah.
And you said, and then I just flattened the brass and made the railing. How do you flatten brass? What did you do to make the railing?
Okay. It's O-scale. It's hammer and an anvil. I'm taking a little piece of brass wire. I'm actually using the end of my Jorgensen vise at the end of my workbench, but that's the only thing I use it for now. I don't build furniture anymore, or very rarely. And I've got a very, very small flat mallet steel hammer that I use, and I just hit it about 6 or 7 times until it's nice and flat, and then very slowly and carefully with a real fine tip pair of needle nose pliers, just bend it about 90 degrees over, maybe a little bit more, and then it hooks on that top railing, solder it together. Take a little bit of time with your cutoff wheel with the Dremel, remove the excess, and you're done.
What kind of wire do you use to start with? You use what, 1/16 rod?
Oh, no, that's 28 thousandths.
Okay.
That's 28 thousandths brass wire. It's Detail Associates, and if I can't get theirs, it's from Clover House.
Got it.
And the Clover House stuff, it's a little brittle. You got to be a little careful with it. But finding the Detail Associates stuff is almost impossible now. I don't know what the story is with that.
Anybody else have a question?
Yeah, sure. What are you using for glass? Is that microscope cover glass, or it looks good?
Not in this particular car, I didn't. This one, it's actually polycarbonate.
Okay.
Lexan, you can get that. You can get sheets of Lexan from it's 5 and 10 thousandths from Clover House.
Oh, right. Looks good.
And what's really nice about that stuff is that CA does not fog it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not like polystyrene. It actually will tolerate being messed with solvents and stuff. It's very
Right.
resistant.
So you're using CA to mount the Lexan as well as to mount the windows.
Actually, I used goo.
Oh, goo, really? Oh,
Yeah, with a very, very, very steady hand,
yeah.
and you can control it. And that's the secret to using goo. Or you can get a micro application tip, but I think that's incredibly wasteful.
Hmm.
I just have a very gentle touch, and I'm holding the polycarbonate with a pair of tweezers, and I'm getting just enough goo on 3 edges. I don't worry about the 4th one. I figured you got 3 out of 4 edges, it's not going to go anywhere. So test fit it, fits, come back, put a little on all 3 edges, drop it into place without making a mess. Easier said than done. Do it without making a mess, and it's not a problem.
Great. Thanks.
Martin, what's the Lexan like to cut?
It's a little harder to cut than polystyrene, but with a steel ruler, your steel scale ruler and a really sharp scalpel, 3 or 4 passes. Well, I don't even use the 5,000s. I'm using the 10,000s. So if you went to the 5,000s, it'd probably be a lot easier. I suspect you could probably use a pair of scissors at that point.
Yeah.
I do use surgical scissors frequently.
The 5 thou, do you find that it has trouble being flat? There's some noise going on here, but with the 5 thou, is it trouble getting it flat, keeping it flat? It looks dead flat on your model.
It's the Lexan polycarbonate's much stiffer.
Okay.
It doesn't flop around like styrene. Nowhere near as much as styrene.
Totally.
Yeah, the polymerization of Lexan polycarbonate is very different than polystyrene.
And Martin, did you say you got that from Clover House?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, Clover House has got a lot of cool stuff. After the last show, after we were done, I showed a couple of gondolas that I built, basically using their dry transfers. With the dry transfer, actually, I mean, I love building using their dry transfers, but I actually use the dry transfers to set the dimensions of the car, because all the lettering has to fit between the braces properly. So you measure the dry transfers, work your way backwards to the size, and it tells you where to put everything on the car. But I like using a lot of their stuff. I've built a lot of their reefer cars using their dry transfers, but that's a little trickier when you get the polychromatics, and you have to put a layer of sealant over each layer, but it still looks good. It just takes patience.
Well, Martin, thank you so much. Really do appreciate it tonight. Quite a lesson. So I mentioned a few minutes ago that we were going to start this I've Got a Question on our shows. And George, you'll be pleased to know that we do have a modeler on the show tonight that has volunteered to do the clinic for you on spray painting. I don't have a date for that yet, but as soon as I get it, I will send you a specific email telling you about it, so you'll be sure to be able to see the show. And for anybody else that's interested, then they'll also be able to view it and hopefully learn a little bit about spray painting. I also want to thank again Clark Cooney, MMR, for his idea that we ought to have some kind of recognition, special recognition for the modelers that are doing the build-alongs for the show, particularly those modelers. We naturally thank everybody that's doing all of the short segments and all of that on the shows, but particularly thanks go out to the people that are coming on and spending the time and the effort to put together the complete build-along of a kit from a specific manufacturer. And I thought that was a great idea. So we have started that. And for that page, we're asking each one of the modelers, as soon as they have completed their My Build for the show, to give us a photo of themselves, a brief bio of themselves, contact information, how to reach them, and then we'll have the links for each one of the build-alongs that they did on our show, so that you'll be able to go to this page, find the person, know how to contact them, find a little personal information about them, and then be able to go to the specific segments in the shows where they did their build along projects. And we're hoping between that page and having that capability, and then having the ability to ask questions on the show, and hopefully have people that are on the show be able to answer your questions. We're hoping that those two things are going to open up the mentoring capabilities for the show a great deal, and that's what we're trying to accomplish. So with that said, I'd like to go to our featured modeler tonight, Paul Dokas. Paul, I really do appreciate you doing this for us, and I can't thank you enough. So I'll welcome you and turn it over to you, sir.
Okay, thank you. I'll see if I've pushed the right buttons here. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Okay, let me this and okay. We've got a full screen. Does everybody see some tracks in the pavement?
No,
No.
nothing.
Okay, so
You have to start the program first.
well, I think I know what I've done. Yeah,
Should be a share screen button at the bottom there.
yeah, okay, let me do that. That's what I was looking for. Got it, found it. Okay, here we are. Okay, now,
There we go.
okay, we're in business.
There you go. We're in business. Go for it.
Oh, God.
Excellent.
Oh, goodness. Anyway, it says I'm going to do tracks in the street, and actually I'm going to be a little broader. I'm going to show you some pictures that I took of the layout before the one I have now, and then talk about today's layout a little more. And ultimately, I'll get to tracks in the street, what I've done to do that. Baltimore has or they have 14 miles or had 14 miles of tracks in the street. I have 9 feet, so it's a little different. So okay, we're going to start in about 1970. I was working for a company that was based in New England, and I took railfan trips up there, and I just thought New England was really a great place to model. And so I came up with this. And this is really northern New England from a place called I forget the town, can't remember the town. Anyway, I called this Wells River. I think it's based on the station of Wells. I forget. It was too many years ago. Anyway, we started this and built a town. So close up the yard here, Woods River. My name of the town was Woods River, and I forget what the name of the prototype was. You get so involved in this that you can't really, you forget. So here's the state. This is a prototype station off the town. Yeah, had a track that split, one White River Junction, another one went off to Boston, and so they needed 2 order boards at the station. There's a lot of granite in the area I was modeling, and so this is a granite finishing area up here. And this is where I had a big kind of a loop in the middle of the basement that train came out from the wall, went around back into the wall. And so I had a lot of space, and I thought, well, I'll put a farm in there. The thing I've done here, though, to make it look even reasonable, is that this barn and this house are in scale. This here is HO scale. And so, and I taper it as it goes down. So you can get an idea. And really, it was quite effective. I mean, you didn't think of there was a difference in scale between gauge, HO scale heifers, or here's some in scale. So it all worked out pretty well. Just had a few inches in between the two scenes. Then the big industry and the layout was a paper mill, white mountain paper. And that was always the favorite job. Everybody wanted the mill job. So I had this layout for, I guess, 20, 25 years, and you run out of things to do. And I said, yeah, I'd like to start, maybe I need to do something else. And interestingly, put an ad in, and a fellow from Boston came and bought the layout. So that went away. I didn't really have to, he tore it up, but all the buildings came out easily and so forth. So anyway, it was time for a change. So why would I get rid of a perfectly good model railroad? Well, I guess contrary to an old cliche, railroads can be completed or at least declared finished. So I declared it finished. And I said, what do you get for this? Well, it opens up a new field of study and exploration. I have new fresh modeling projects. I took advantage of some of the new technologies. I had a command control, but it wasn't a DCC one. So I got a new DCC system into it. It was easy to incorporate. And so I always told people, I said, well, if you need a change in your life, changing prototypes is cheaper than a divorce. So I said, well, I'm going to do something a little different. I've done New England, and I said, I want to do maybe a big industrial city scene. And I looked at Norfolk, Virginia, probably because in 1955, there were some interesting paint schemes. There was, there were, the Virginia, very colorful, Atlantic coastline, pretty good. Seaboard had some wonderful schemes and so on. But I said, that's about 3 hours drive to do research and walk around the streets and so forth. So I said, maybe Baltimore would make more sense. So that's what I picked. So Baltimore's got a lot of interesting railroads, B&O, of course. I have a Walther's version of one of these engines here, very good. The city, the Baltimore, Ohio, had a lot of buildings with nice lettering on there, looked good. Railroad everybody's favorite is the Western Maryland. The Acela and Amtrak going through on this Northeast corridor, but they also had a lot of branch lines out of Baltimore and tracks in the street. They had this gas electric here, made a round trip once a day for the commuters. I didn't model that particular, but it was, one of the things open. Canton Railroad, good little short line there. There's several of them. There was the Patapsco River and Patapsco and Back River Railroad, which is belonged to Bethlehem Steel. And everybody will say, well, why don't you model some Bethlehem Steel? Way too big, and I only had about 300 square feet to put this in. So I just modeled Maryland, Pennsylvania is another railroad that I could have modeled, but I did not. So there are a lot of opportunities in Baltimore. Some of the things that I like, just wandering the streets, buildings with big lettering. Over here, this is Pennsylvania, is it Philadelphia Quartz Company. they grind stuff into, I guess, silica gel is a big product that they have. And it's a building that's not just another, square building like this. It's a building of many shapes, and that appealed to me. Down here is a pier. There are lots of big piers in Baltimore. This is the Pennsylvania Pier 1. It's pretty much during most of my construction, it stayed up, but they finally put a bulldozer to it. It was inactive. This is the John Brown Liberty ship. That's a museum piece that was there, and it had to be moved. But it's still existing. It's one of 2 Liberty ships that got saved. And then we have over here the typical Baltimore street. You see this here. This is called formstone. It's like permastone. Evidently, they put a lot of houses, a lot of row houses in Baltimore, but the brick quality was very poor. So this got to cover it up. Something there's one house that I guess the brick quality was okay. Didn't go with it. Although they're going back to stripping some of it off now. So anyway, this is a big grain elevator. I don't know what all the little windows on the side is, but it is now emerged as a condo. So it's like they knew what was going to happen to it in 20 years after it was built. And I thought if I ever moved to Baltimore, I'd like to live there. That would be very good. Just a beautiful view and trains and ships coming in and out of the harbor. Notice this is a little sign here. This is a bar sign. It'll show up in one of my models before. So I really made a list of the various industries I wanted. There was a lot of rye distillery. There was a lot of rye grown outside Baltimore and distilled into liquor. I have a couple chemical and fertilizer plants. Of course, I had the piers, oil depot and refiner. I don't think they didn't really make the cut finally. Foundry, I have a big produce terminal, meatpacking plant, and so forth. So I'm pretty well worked down the list. Here's a map of Baltimore. It's the dark lines are B&O lines. There's some faint lines like this here that are Pensy in that case. I think the Mod Pa and the Western Maryland are all in there. So you just see how complex Baltimore is. And it's just modeling it per se. It's not a little mountain town that you can model item for item. And here's what I boiled that map down to. Over here is Highland Town. I put my big meatpacking house there. My rye distillery was over here. Here's where I had my tracks in the street, my 9 feet of tracks. This is a area where I had both the B&O and the Pensy, B&O and the Western Maryland served. The Western Maryland served it as with a car float. Over here, I have a pier served by the Canton Railroad. This is the Canton Railroad. And I have transfers that come over here. So I've developed, what I did is I developed it into neighborhoods and created those 4 and actually 5 different neighborhoods. I said I had about 300 square feet in here. My staging is in the back room here, comes under some steps that are the entrance to the room, and come around here. And this ends up here, right over here. This is my Canton Railroad, my peninsula in the middle that serves on one side is Wagner's Point. It's where it has a car float comes in from Western Maryland, and the B&O comes in by rail. Over here is Highland Town. So kind of give you a quick walk around the railroad here. This is Highland Town. My meatpacking house, a retail coal dealer, it's a marine or mariner, or no, it's a marine wood marking place, make places for boats and things like that. The duplicated some of those houses that you saw in the earlier picture. What I've done here, these are photographs in here, which I took of the page and pasted in a piece of illustration board, then cut out the windows and took an identical picture like that and put it back behind it. So it really creates, you say, boy, that's cheating, but it's more details, I think, than you ever get cutting styrene to it. And most of my buildings are styrene, but here's a row of my paper buildings. And this is styrene here, where I actually had to build it in, so forth. And these are 3D here. But the feeling of using paper is just great. At the other end of that section, this is the Maryland rye plant, the distillery. Have a team track in here, another industry back here. And here's Wagner's Point. Now this is served by, and was, based on the project, by both the B&O had the land connection, and after a while, B&O was making a lot of money serving this area, and some of the operators went to the Western Maryland and the Pennsy and said, if you'll put a pier in, we'll give you some business. Simple as that. And so for years, there was a 50-50 deal between the Western Maryland and the Pennsy. And the Western Maryland did the work. Pennsy would loan them a locomotive for 6 months of the year, and then would go and they would swap engines 6 months of the year, but it was always a Western Maryland crew that ran it. Then I had this section where I have transfers running over to Canton Yard there. And the other end of the bridge is a Walther's bridge, which I've added the little watchman's tower, the dealer's tower, the guy, and they put the layer, the cribbing here, which I think adds a lot to the model. Then the Canton Yard piers are, and this is that picture I showed you earlier. It's shortened. This building's the longest building. This is like 3 feet long, and the real model probably have to be 9 feet or something like that. So very, but anyway, it works for me. Chemical plant. And finally, we get to Carroll Street. Carroll was actually, that street was not a prototype street, but Carroll was a guy who laid the cornerstone when the B&O was built. Now, I didn't know railroads had cornerstones, but I guess they didn't know what they were first railroads in the country. So take a look at some of the tracks in the street now. The reason they ever had tracks in the street is that the city got built before the trains got running. So by 1830, they had big pier sections and so forth. And this happened all over the country. And so the only place to get down to the pier was these tracks in the street. So, and they would do anything. Here's a kind of a very sharp crossing. see, here's a little bit of track work there. See, got track fans out, track crossing. That's a bit of a challenge if you're doing it in HO or O or any modeling. Here it is in a model form. This is Severna Park up in Maryland. So he copied some of what they did. Here it is. That's where little Joe worked. And here is some. This was a can company, National Can. Obviously, it had 3 tracks in there, had tracks over here. Two sides of the building were all tracks loading in and out. And so they've got a lot of traffic. Here it is today, where this track is still in the street. This is the building, same building, and it's now a condo. So don't need the tracks anymore. But it was switched by the B&O until the middle 40s by a little, juice model, little box cab took off, had overhead wire just like a trolley car. Those sort of things got replaced. The Pennsy had these cars, which is quite old. They originally used horses to pull cars around. Here it is, a new version. This lasted till I think almost 1960. It had a truck rebuilt. And here we are. Here's the Baltimore, Ohio version of that. Instead, a little more looks a little nicer. But the reason to have the Pennsy, or in this case, the Conrail engine or truck meeting the B&O, was that they were interchanging cars. The B&O had a car float into Baltimore into this area for a while, but after a while it got too expensive, so they made a deal with the Pennsy to give them interchange service in Baltimore. Here it is, where it is they were doing interchange down there. So they didn't have much. They had, I think, maybe one customer at the time. And so they dropped that. Pennsy still had quite a few tracks at the end. There's some more B&O tracks coming in here. So it's another view. The Pennsy would bring in cars on tracks that weren't sharp curvature with a diesel, and then turn it over to these little gas trains and trams for delivery to the car, to the businesses. Okay, and here we are, what I've done, and my 9 feet of track. We have this produce yard. This is the produce yard, and I have several other industries in here wrapped all around here. So train can come in here with maybe 15 cars, and you can work for maybe 2 hours. So you get quite a bit of work for it. It's on a center peninsula. This is a piece of wallboard that separates the two. This is Wagner's Point over here, and this is my Tracks in the Street section, which I call Carroll Street. Doing it, what I used for the tracks is this is a European, I think made in Sweden and imported here for the trolley guys, trolley people, O-scale trolley, code 100 works. So that's what they sell it for. Custom Tracks is an operation in California. I think somebody else also sells it now. So I tack this down. I have a laser cut they call pavers in there. This is the styrene street. Here we are. I have the track, the girder track, just right into tacked right to the Homoso track. This is model engineering track here. These switches are scratch built. I have to match it up with the code 100 versus the code. This could even be code 55. I do a little shimming. Okay, the switch here is they had single point switches. And what happens is this is out of service. And what often happened, even when it was in service, they'd have to take a pry bar and clean this out. So here oops, I'm pushing the wrong button here. Yes. Okay, back to work. So what would happen is when this was against the rail here, the wheel here would be, the set of wheels would be kind of shoved over here. And when it got to this point, it would go down this track. If the truck was shoved over here to the right, then the truck would go down here. Now you're talking not high speed, you're talking maybe 5 miles an hour or something like that. So it really worked, it seemed to work very well, made things a little simpler. Here's a model that I did of it. In this case, I didn't use they wouldn't use a pry bar. I just added it. Sometimes they would have built-in switch throws. And so anyway, so watch, I'm gonna just throw the switch over there and that'll take it down here. This may be a little closer. Maybe I should have had it back here, but it seems to work just fine. And that's what counts. To do it, I just put a tortoise like I have a conventional switch and just a simple little rod through the back end of it. I used laser cut paving blocks. Actually, my friend Bernie Kopinski, he cut it for me. And to fit it around switches, what I do is a paper template, which I put on here, rub it with a pencil, then use this template to cut out a section here. Now, in doing that, you lost some of the little top sides of it, the paving blocks, but that's all right. By the time you get it painted, gray, it doesn't show. So it works. Here I said, okay, I built it, I think 3 switches entirely on that way. And I said, this one I have the road going over and the conventional. I just worked in plaster here to fit this. So it's a conventional switch, just laid in pavement. There's more track, which I put in National Bow Brewery, the Sun Paper warehouse here. But I just spread plaster in, cut it, grooved it in before it really set hard. Another way of doing it, this is Alexandria, where I live. In 1969, they were using just ties, old ties there, through there. Over here, I'm not sure. I guess this is conventional track work. Here's a switch off here, so forth. Okay.
Hey,
so
Paul, a quick question.
Sure.
Somebody wants to know, is the girder rail compatible with NMRA?
I don't think there's an MRA standard. You just butt it up. Not a problem. You just butt it together and it works fine.
Paul, this is Bill Neal. How are you doing?
It makes sense. Pardon me?
It's Bill Neal. How are you doing?
Very well.
I asked the question. I was worried about the flangeway depth in the girder rail. Sometimes those are very shallow and the cars ride on their flanges rather than on the railhead. Have you had any problems with that?
No, not at all, because it just, if it's a little high for the car, remember you're bringing the rail up to match that. So, and there's no girder rail in there to really get in your way. So it's not a problem.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
So anyway, want to walk down the street here, go back here. You notice I took a picture of the sign, made a copy of it, scaled it out. This is a DMP old cast model that it was. Yeah, painted it up. It's pretty good. Down here at this is a grocery place, grocery storehouse. A fella came in and said, "Yeah, my father used to work for that company." I said, "Oh, well, I never saw it. There were no pictures of the building. What was it like?" He said it was a 4-story building. I said, "It's going to this way. It's going to stay 2 stories." Okay, another view of it. Notice this area here. I'll get back to that. Here I have, this is probably the first resin or poured model that ever came out. Forget what the name of it was, but it was just a beautiful, it was meant to be a hardware store, I think, is what they sold it at. I turned it into needed a bar or grill place for people, local workers to work. One thing in Baltimore is, or they're called Arabs, and they have horse-drawn wagons to this day. The city kind of promotes it as kind of a tourist attraction, and they sell vegetables and fruit, and particularly to people in areas that don't have a nearby grocery store. And there are a lot of sections that don't have that. It's still a very poor city, but it's something that only Baltimore has. Okay, these are our prototype all buildings I took. Marine supply place, a feed store. What would a feed store be doing in Baltimore? Well, there was in 1955, there were still a lot of horses around. They sold to the distilleries. There were several of those. They sold grain to them. So, and I took that off a photograph. You notice what I did is I took one story out of the scratch-built building, and I didn't want a big tall building there. It was good to have 1 floor, but not 4. So, now, street trackage, there's a lot of sharp curves. This one is really too sharp. It's so sharp that I can't even get a truck around it with my finger. I push it, I can't even get it there. And what I should have done is put the switch over in this track and had it build a crossing to go in there more gently. So that's just a dummy. That's just scenery, that car in there. I've got enough other sidings to work, so it doesn't matter. Another building that I took for it was along the street. And if I wanted, I could park a box car or something in front of it. A lot of industries in street running did not necessarily have spurs. They'd bring in a bunch of lumber, a batch of lumber, and unload it right away. It might be there overnight or something. So it wasn't too bad. And the traffic wasn't as bad as it is today. Here, I just said this, I took this off here.
Hey, Paul, quick question.
Maryland Chemical was another. Yo.
I was just
Go ahead.
curious, is the sewers working?
My sewers or the ones in
Yeah.
Baltimore? No, my sewers. Okay. No, I imagine there, it's very high drought area over here. Never rains.
So you don't need them to be working.
Don't need them to be working.
Gotcha.
Okay. National Bow Brewery. What I would do for backdrops, rather than get a big, long for length of the room printout, I would just put sections of a photograph in, and that's enough to take the get rid of the black wall. You don't really spend a whole lot of time looking at it anyway. So I mentioned this before. That is purely a photograph, not a build-up scene, but it certainly seems to work out very well in this building. This is the edge of this is the backdrop right here, and this is a piece of paper there. Here you can see there was I should air or take that out, but it didn't. There's a couple more where I just put the building is not thick enough to go all the way to the wall, so I just put a couple of quickie sides. Another side of the street is the produce yard. Other end of the produce yard. This this track here is a track over to Wagner's Point, the other side of the peninsula. And I make all my buildings removable. I just lift them up if I need to. I just put a little basement wall around them, so to speak, a little piece of strip wood, let the material of the thing come up to them here. I'm pushing the wrong button here. Anyway, so it makes it easy. If I have a problem in that, 3 or 4 feet of track, I can get to it very easily.
Oh, what kind of lighting do you use?
This is a lot of this was, remember, photo floods that I used during the photography, but I have fluorescence.
Thank you.
Whoops. Okay. Now, I've talked about industrial, settings for tracking the street, and that's at one time there were about 700 cities or things that had tracks in the street. Maybe particularly in the Midwest, there seemed to be a lot of tracks there. Go through the middle of the town, and because I guess was the only way they could get through. This is an example of that sort of thing. Monongahela running from their yard up to the coal fields, and it had about a half mile of street running. If you model the Monongahela, you got to model this church. This is one wonderful scene. As I say, there's another coal train coming in the opposite direction. There's one not too far from home here, Ashland, Virginia. The Model Railroad published this picture as an example of a prototype track in the street. And somebody, of course, wrote in and said, that's not track in the street. He's just got a right-of-way, a reserved right-of-way down the middle of the street. So I don't know. Do you tell that to people in Ashland, Virginia, that occasionally there's a video that a guy driving and trying to go down the street here rather than over here? And a train, of course, comes and hits him. And so for all intents and purposes, some people might think there is track in the street there. And I think it might be a way to actually where you have a town along a scene, you have a street, then you drop down and you have another track running there. You could put them all in one. You could save yourself a few inches of depth and have something unique. So you want some more information on the subject? Trains had a good article on the subject, the history. I wrote an article for Model Railroader. So, whoops. You want to make note of those mentally or otherwise, they're available. Okay. In 1970, I bought a house in Alexandria, and this is the view out the kitchen window. And this is a Civil War tunnel, pre-Civil War, actually. And the Southern went down there, and they were at the time were primarily taking newsprint down to a Washington Post warehouse. And this ran, sometimes at night, sometimes during the day, and so on. And the city finally said, we don't like that track on the street. But they kept the tunnel, and they even braced it so that the road over here runs on top of the tunnel. So they put bracing in there. So very good. So anyway. And another view. So we'll finish up with that.
Excellent.
Very good. So any questions, anything I can answer? Good, I covered all the points. Or you're not going to put tracks in the street. Okay. So,
Paul, I'm surprised you didn't show a picture of West Lafayette, Indiana, where the Monon went right down 5th Street.
Yeah, there's as I said, there's a lot of stuff in the Midwest. I've never seen those tracks. I've never been to them.
I think they're gone now, but they were pretty interesting for a long time.
Yeah.
Mainline trains going through there.
So,
I just saw a video of some tracks in the street in a town in Northwest Kentucky. I don't remember the name of the town. And there was a CSX train coming down the street, and a minivan was coming up the street, and the minivan ran into the train.
Of course, people. That's why there were 700, and the article in Trains Magazine said maybe there was a little under 100 left, and I bet they're down to 50. Whenever they can abandon some and take it out of service and find an alternate way to go.
Pittsburgh South Side had tons of street trackage feeding both the mills and the Duquesne Brewery.
Mm-hmm.
Paul, you want to turn off your screen share so that we can see everybody?
Okay.
There you go. What got you originally interested in street traffic?
Oh, I don't have it. It was something different. It was something in Baltimore. So what do? I'm modeling Baltimore. It would be crazy not to have tracks in the street.
The single point switches that you built, the key to, what would you say is the main key to successfully modeling that?
I build a lot of switches myself, so it wasn't, in fact, it could even be easier. You only have to do one switch point. So it was very simple. And I think they may have a commercial frog. I do not like building frogs, so you can buy enough frogs of whatever size you want these days.
Did you put it, how do I put this? If both of them move, if both of the points move, they're equal right across from each other. For a single point, does that come before
it comes, the single point is ahead of the other one. Because,
How far ahead did you put your?
well, mine is pretty close, but I'd say 2, 3, 4 feet, something like that difference. They're
Okay.
staggered that much. So that it's so they can establish which way that truck is going to go. That's what they need, whether it shifts to the left or to the right.
Right, right.
Well, I just wanted to say I've seen your articles many times in the Railroad Press and that kind of stuff, and I've always been really amazed at your pictures and everything you do. So I'm glad to meet you here. It's good. I've never met you, and you just do a fantastic job on anything you do, and again tonight. Thank you so much, Paul.
Well, thank you. Your name?
Roy Warner.
Where do you live?
Mississauga, Ontario.
Okay, you're Canadians.
Oh yeah, we got lots of model railroaders. Clark's one. Yeah, you know Clark. Yeah, and we have lots of stuff up here too.
Deny about Clark.
Yeah, well, it's fun.
Really, you guys, come on.
Oh, Clark, sorry I mentioned your name then.
Oh, yeah.
I wanted to ask Bill Neal, you've got some, you have any, you have tracks in the street in yours?
Easy to say, Paul. Yeah, here and there. There's, I think my team tracks in Steubenville are in the street. And there's at least 2 or 3 spurs that run down streets and that sort of thing. I've tried all different methods. They all work pretty well. I did one with plaster, just smearing the plaster over the track and digging it out after it was partially dried. And I've done cutting styrene and stuff, and even used aircraft plywood for one situation. So I love track work in the street. If I had to move to a different house with a smaller basement, I'd probably build an industrial line, much like you did, but I'd make the whole damn thing track work in the street and put as many track crossings in there as I could.
Yeah, you got plenty of good prototypes in Baltimore.
Oh yeah,
as you saw.
In fact, Philadelphia has a lot down around Delaware Avenue. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah,
and I've actually tracked the Burlington Northern has one in Chicago where it's double track all the way from Burlington through a large industrial area to the Santa Fe, and they had a lot of those track situations you were talking about where a track would come off of the far line, cross over the near line, and go into a structure. There must have been, last time I looked, there were dozens and dozens of those situations where they're trying to get a large radius curve by going off the far track. Very interesting stuff.
I was talking to some B&O switchers or brakemen that worked those tracks, and they said that they would, I guess, put kind of a special coupler or something in there, a link between the two couplers, so they could get the swing on them and that. And they, coming out, they would hook a chain to the car.
Yeah.
And have a guy sitting on a brake. So if the chain broke, they could, and the car was continue to move, they could stop it.
Right. Yeah. That must have been kind of
a lot of hard work.
Yeah. Not exactly OSHA compatible.
Exactly.
Hey, Paul, this is Greg. One thing I noticed you failed to mention, the swing bridge that you built there, which I think is excellent modeling, also works, and it works with your DCC throttle.
Right, I did. Yeah, I don't, it kind of hangs up a little bit. It doesn't work perfectly. So, but a reason that I did that was Bill Darnaby, the fellow modeler in Chicago, I once had it when it was just a 2x4 across there. He said, I told him it's going to be a bridge and et cetera, et cetera. He says, well, it's going to open and close, right? And I said, sure. And then I got thinking about it. I said, well, it's possible to do that. So, but it works sometimes better than others.
He's the son of a bitch that talked me into making 2 levels on my layout.
Yeah.
You know what come on, Bill. You know what you call those people? Friends.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It's not the thing to do.
Yeah.
You know, one Paul, you mentioned Bill Darby and Bill. One of the great lines I heard from a modular group was called "Building Better Model Railroads by Peer Pressure."
You're right. Yeah, I mean, I think he does this to everybody.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Paul, in your presentation there, in your pictures, you were showing one intersection that had about 3 streets coming together. And I believe that it looked like, was that on a cover back in Craftsman back in the 70s? And it was also an art piece that was attached to it with the brakeman riding on the front of the locomotive. Was that?
This is a model photograph you're talking about?
Yes.
The
One
Severna Park.
of your photos there in the presentation.
Yeah, well, the Severna Park, I don't remember exactly. I mean, that was 1960 something when I did that. And so I don't remember anybody quite that. I think they may have, the picture I used may have been used. And the 2 pictures you saw of the model, Severna,
Yes.
may have been in that article.
Yeah, it has that curve, the building on the corner has a curve around the corner of it. And that always stuck out in my mind. I love that. So.
And Severna Park is still operating, as I recall.
Yeah, it's still there.
Yep.
Very much. The guy who really did all the model buildings, whole crew, who was a surgeon and so forth, he retired and couldn't cut people open, so he started building buildings, filled the room with building, and then he got into building airplanes, model airplane, built all the airplanes of World War I, and then when he ran out of those airplanes, he built all the models of planes of World War II. I mean, he's just great. You can take a piece of flat board and turn it into anything. Okay, go ahead.
What did you use for the pavers in the devil strip in your roads between the rails?
That was a cut piece of some sort of board. It was a board that I think had some special adhesive hanging it together. It had Bernie put into his machine, just cranked them out.
Oh, nice.
And then that was it. Now you could use certainly a plastic. Reason I had it cut is that the pavers were a little larger than bricks. So if you get some larger plastic brick, that would also work for you.
I'm up here in Toronto, Canada, and I used to work for the city, so designing streets, and so we had a lot of street trackage back in the 70s still, and so whenever the railways wanted to replace some of their trackage or the rail on it, the city is responsible for the pavers going in between the devil strip. But we went to concrete because it was just too much labor putting the pavers. But they were granite pavers, and the earliest ones we had in Toronto were actually ballast in ships. They would come over in with ballast. It's empty, so they could take timber back to Britain. So that's where some of those pavers between the rails came from.
You know, we thought, well, you can use S-scale pavers. S-scale brick might work. I don't know. It all depends how big they make it. Make it not too big.
I enjoyed your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. It was kind of, normally I'm giving these things in person, so you tend to get feedback. You don't know whether, I enjoy this part better than actually presenting the thing. It's just a different media.
It can be a little disconcerting because you can't read people's faces.
That's right.
The presentation. And it took me a little while to get used to it.
Yeah. So, okay.
So, hey, Paul, you've had such a good time here. Bernie was supposed to be on last week and he couldn't make it because he's just got too much going on. But next time you see him, let him know how much fun you had. And we really hope he can find the time to get here sometime.
Oh, he'll be good.
So Paul, let me help you with something. So why don't you share your screen again? And it's not so much that I want people to see your screen. I want to show you something you can do. So when you share your screen.
Let's see if I can do that. Well, yes.
Well, anyway, the point that I was making, when you share your screen, what you'll see is at the upper left, you'll generally see a little window with a couple of video images on it.
Yeah.
If you click on that, you can do a gallery view. And then you can grab it and grow it and make it much bigger. So when you're presenting, you can actually not look so much at your slides. You can see the gallery of everybody who's listening to you.
Okay.
So it actually turns out there's a way, what you have to do when you're sharing your slides, look, there'll be a little video window up at the right, and generally have a couple of pictures. They'll have you and the last person who talked. But if you click on that, there are different things. And on the far right, there's one that's got a bunch of little squares on it. If you click on that, you get a gallery view there, and you can actually grow that window and make it big to see the people that are listening to you. Because if you don't need to see your slides to talk about them, that way you can see the audience better.
Okay, here we.
But you have to share to do it. But next time you
Yeah.
share, look up there at the upper right.
Well, I can share.
Yeah, there you go.
Share. Somewhere
don't-
here. Share screen. Okay, there we are. Come on, let's.
You gotta speed up that internet there in Washington.
Okay, got it. Okay.
Now, if you look on your screen, you'll notice that you've got a little, if you're in full screen, you've got a little video thing that shows you.
Right. I have several people, not the whole group back. I have about 6 people.
So
showing.
grab the bottom
Here.
left corner of that and make it bigger. So grab the bottom left, think of that as a window. If you grab the bottom left corner, you can grow it across your screen.
Listen, let me do this.
Hey, just do it separate. We don't need to do it now.
It doesn't seem to work.
Phil, you can talk about this, I think, a little bit later, because we need to stop the recording so these people can get off if they want to.
Exactly. I'm sorry.
So the next Zoom meeting is going to be Saturday, May the 22nd. Rick and Maureen Hunter are going to start their build along that night. So make sure that you attend for that. And then Dave Silvermail is going to be here. John Frankfurt is going to be here. Paul Thompson's supposed to be back by then, I think. So it should be a great show. Please visit our website, newtracksmodeling.com, for more information on all the upcoming stuff that we've got going on and the upcoming build-alongs particularly. Thank you so much for coming. I hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll see you next time.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.